Hey there, and welcome to this week's Music Career Study Group. It's our weekly gathering of the artist community where we exchange ideas, we compare notes, we talk about moving your music career forward, and it's just a good time of being with other artists. I look forward to it every week. Chris, don't you look forward to it?
I do. And normally we ask for people out there who are participating to ask your questions, but also give your own advice. And we're hoping none of you have advice on today's topic. We hope that none of you have experienced what we're going to talk about today so that you have none of your own perspective to share. That's my desire.
Ooh, what a teaser. Yes, while you're settling in, say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. This is an interactive live stream. We want to hear from you. And if you have questions along the way, or if you have experience around the topic for today, let us know. But there is an epidemic in the music industry right now, and it's impacting all independent artists, and we're going to address it today.
Yeah, and it's a topic that everyone watching needs to understand pretty thoroughly, because you might hear what the topic is and say, "Oh, I'm not guilty of that. I don't do that. I won't do that. It doesn't apply to me." But this problem is so bad that it's actually impacting many artists in a certain way. And you also run the risk of being kind of haunted by this problem, even if you don't knowingly engage in this bad behavior. So pay attention.
Yeah, and Chris, I don't think we're ones to be accused of being overly dramatic. So when we're like, settle in for this special edition of Music Career Study Group, we're going to set our sights squarely on the elephant in the room, which is streaming fraud. It is a massive epidemic in the music business, and honestly, it could shape what the music business becomes in the near future, and how it moves forward into the future.
Yeah, and so today we're going to do a discussion of what it is, why it happens, what are the sort of factors that are leading to it being such a big problem, how it impacts those who are guilty of knowingly doing streaming fraud, as well as how it can impact you in a whole lot of negative ways. Because really, we don't want like the few bad apples to spoil your music's chances of being out there and reachable for your fans. So yeah, that's the discussion.
Yeah, and so if you're just joining us, again, this is the Music Career Study Group. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're streaming from. Feel free to ask questions along the way. And while you do that, and hello, Miles.
What's up, Miles?
We've got. I couldn't see, I was looking at my notes, so I couldn't see if you put some people on the screen already. But
yeah,
we've got people from Virginia,
New
Czech
Hampshire,
Republic,
Sedona. Tim from
Sedona.
Sedona.
I've been all over our country and lots of places in the world, but I've never been to Sedona, and I hear it looks amazing.
I've been to Sedona. Can I have 10 seconds to tell a completely aside story?
So quickly,
it's Sedona is full of people who, believe in energy vortexes and all this sort of stuff. And someone took me to a place that's supposed to have this really intense energy, right? And we hiked to the top of this little hill, and they said, "Do you feel it?" And I said, "Yeah, it's the wind." That's the wind was pretty intense at the top of that hill.
There you go. We've got Atlanta in the house, and so yeah. So we've got a question here, like streaming fraud. Do you mean fake views? We're going to dive into it because it's way beyond just that, and artists are running into it without even knowing it. So just buckle up, and we're going to go on this ride together. But first, we've got some music news. Again, if you're joining us, this is the Music Career Study Group. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And Chris, why don't you dive into some news?
Hey, Mo Stanton. Yeah, so if you have paid attention to the Music Career Study Group over the past few weeks, you've probably heard me say this a lot, but Reverb Nation Premium membership now includes unlimited distribution. So at no extra cost, you can release everything you want. EPs, singles, full albums, demos, live recordings, remixes, whatever you want, comes with UPCs and ISRCs, no extra cost. So you can really build a huge catalog of music over your lifetime without incurring additional distribution fees.
Yeah. Head over to reverbnation.com. Check it out. It's lots of new things landing over there. We've been working hard behind the scenes to launch some new features. This is one of them. There's some other big announcements coming soon. And it's full suite of marketing tools, and now unlimited music distribution for premium members. So check it out. Next up, TikTok's testing Spotify and Apple Music pre-saves. What's the deal with this, Chris?
Well, so they closed, or at the end of this month, they're closing TikTok Music, which is their attempt at a streaming platform. They've kind of pivoted away from that, and instead, I think they want to both help musicians, empower them with some features that help people on TikTok take an action off of that platform to support the music they love. So, in this case, it's Spotify and Apple Music pre-saves. But the other benefit of this for TikTok is that when they create these features, they're going to have a lot of data to continually show the industry and the media, hey, look how important we are for music discovery. We're driving all this engagement on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever else. So it's kind of a twofold benefit to them to do that.
Yeah. What do we got next? We got a couple more items.
Similarly, speaking of doing something on a platform that gets you to a different platform, Instagram now lets you save tracks that you discover in Instagram. Well, maybe you're scrolling through reels or stories, whatever, you love a song, you can now automatically save it to your library in Spotify. So that's kind of a nice, quick little tool.
Yeah, and that's something I always forget. Like I'll drop a story or a post and I'll totally forget to add music because it might be, but yeah, take advantage of that, because if people hear your post or see your post and like, what track is that playing? Regardless if it's related to your music, like what you're posting about, make sure your music's in there and people can save it.
Yeah. And then last thing on our list, speaking of Spotify, is that they have created this in-app tool to make very quick custom playlist covers. And when I say in-app, I mean Spotify itself, the listening app, not Spotify for artists. This is a tool for any Spotify user who makes playlists. If you just created a playlist, it's got that awful default thing with the 4 album covers. It looks real bland. So this is kind of fun. You can play with colors, fonts, different emojis and stuff. And you don't have to be precious about it. I've used it in like a minute to create a somewhat interesting playlist cover. So check that out.
Yeah. Excellent. So those were some of the interesting news items out there. Again, you're watching the Music Career Study Group. Say hi in the comments. Feel free to ask questions along the way, but let's get into our topic for today. And we are talking streaming fraud. It's everywhere. It's exploding. It's the number one issue the music business is dealing with. If you follow any music business press, you will for sure have seen this topic. There's some big court cases happening around it that are going to trial soon, and all sorts of stuff happening. But I think the problem is so big and it's impacting so many artists that it was important for us to have this episode, one, to make sure that artists aren't inadvertently committing fraud. But even just in the indie artist community, in fact, Chris, this morning, I got an ad from a different distribution company on a social network, and I looked at all the comments, and there was all these people angry because their music had been removed by said distribution company without notice, without explanation, no explanation, and Spotify saying they were committing fraud. And like, what the heck? I've never done any of those things. And there's no process, no anything. So it's important to understand this issue. It's rampant and more people are bumping into it. And we also want to make sure you don't do it intentionally, but we're going to explain it all and dive in. So we hope you stick around for the whole thing, because you're just going to keep hearing more and more about this issue as we head into 2025. It's a massive issue that needs to be solved.
Yeah, maybe we should start with just saying, what is streaming fraud?
Yes.
I know we're going to read a description, or I can go through this description. A lot of artists, again, will say, I'm not doing that and I won't do that. This still can impact you greatly. So pay attention. Streaming fraud is when you or another person, entity, company artificially inflates the play count of a song or an album or a playlist on a streaming platform through a few different means. There's bots, there's automated scripts that can run, click farms, or something as simple as just looped playback. You just play the same song on a loop for 30 hours in a row. And there's some other methods as well, but that's the idea, is that you're basically creating fake streams. It's not a real engagement. And often these things will stream up to the point at which that stream is monetized and counted. So that used to be 30 seconds. In some places that's changed, but basically it hits that minimum criteria and then says, okay, we're good. And it's meant to boost the look is how do I say it? Boost the impression that you are a more legitimate artist, or that this track has more engagement than it actually does. And yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, and I don't see this in our notes, but maybe one thing that might help people understand is that when we moved from a purchase economy to a play economy for the music business, that was a fundamental shift in how everything worked. There's always been fraud in any industry, and both Chris and I have worked in distribution for many, many years. And when it was a download world, fraud looked different, and it was easier to spot and easier to control. But when we went to the economy being based on plays, and for your monthly fee, you can stream as much as you want, people started going, let's see, I can make it look like I'm more popular than I am, or I can game the system and just use this as a cash vending machine, just by getting the play button pushed over and over again. And so that's where things like bots and fake streams and other things like that became rampant. And so there's multiple incentives for people to do this. The financial is one, but also, as Chris, since you and I have worked together in the indie artist space, there's this, I don't know, artists wanting to juice their metrics to make it look like they've got more followers, whether it's social network, going all the way back to the MySpace days.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
More play, more everything to make it look like they're popular. And it's funny because it's pretty obvious when you're not popular, but you have a lot of streams.
Yeah, well, it's there was a useful term that came out around, I don't know, 5 years ago, called vanity metrics. These are metrics that you are trying to boost for no other reason than you feel like your ego will be bruised if people think less of you based on these numbers. But deep down, you, the artist, that it's mostly fake. And how does that boost your ego anyway? So avoid trying to boost vanity metrics. We'll talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
There's at least three different kinds of streaming fraud I wanted to draw people's attention to. The first is buying streams. This would be like where a service maybe says, hey, we'll guarantee 5,000 streams for X amount of money. You spend the money. Now that service is going to go and pump up your numbers. Again, none of that is real audience engagement. There's also kind of trying to manipulate the recommendation engines or the algorithms or just the stream counts by creating fake user accounts. So that's more like on the user end, you may have this like ClickFarm or whatever that now has 300 different Spotify accounts all doing something in concert. And then we already mentioned this, but looping. So you could loop a song, like a single track, but also this extends into the playlist world where it's like, hey, 8 hours of whatever BS dryer machine noise. Let's loop that forever and ever and ever and ever, and let's pump that up. Lots of different things like that.
Yeah. Well, the fake user accounts, and this is one where I think artists could be like, well, I'm not buying fake streams, but I've seen artists, in fact, even before streaming was the main platform in the United States. Chris and I have worked in distribution for many, many years. And I remember taking a call from an artist way back in the day where they were like, why haven't you paid me? I'm like, well, it looks like you don't have any stream or any activity here. And they're like, no, I've got 5 computers set up streaming my music from morning till night. Why aren't you paying me? I'm like,
because that's fraud.
Yeah, because that's fraud. I'm like, why don't you just get a job? I mean, you'll make more money and you'll feel better about yourself. But yeah, so even that is considered fraud. So creating a bunch of fake user accounts, which you can do, and then trying to stream your music over and over and over again, that is considered fraud as well. It's not a real user listening to a track because they enjoy the music they're hearing, or they're just pushing the play button.
Yeah. And, fraud itself, it's a bit of a loaded term. And I think as it gets discussed in the music industry is sort of a gray area. Essentially what we mean is, inflated streams, because I'm thinking of, there's a band called Wolfpack. You remember them?
Yes.
Great band, super, super talented. They have amazing original music, but maybe 2013, 2014, they did a stunt. It was like an ironic joke where they released a silent album, right? And they were like, hey, fans, just listen to this all night long. Just press play. It won't wake you up. You'll sleep through it because there's nothing there. So there's a part of that to me that's very charming. It's an ironic joke. I think they meant it to be ironic and not to be fraud. However, Spotify was like, no, that's inflated streams. It's not real invested engagement. None of that either.
I think they did it as a commentary on streaming payouts. That's if I recall correctly. And they ended up making like 20 or 30,000, and I think they got paid for it. But then Spotify changed some rules that silent tracks couldn't be distributed anymore. So, like I said, there was a fundamental shift that happened when we left the CD download world into streaming, where everything's streaming now. The fundamental shift being that people had to buy something, and so your barrier, like no one's going to buy a blank track or a quiet track or things. But in a streaming world, the kind of audio that you'll find now could be all over the place, like very legit. There's white noise on these platforms that people put on when they do sleep. So those kind of things are different. And the streaming world sort of ran into these things flat-footed, not expecting that to happen, even though, the internet had been around for a while and we've seen what people do. Larry had a good comment. Fame is fleeting, not worth the effort. Larry, if you knew the amount of effort some of these people go to commit fraud, I'm like, just get a job. If you put that effort into your job, you'd be doing just fine.
Or wait, here's a radical idea. Put that effort into marketing.
You
could actually have real fans instead of a million fake ones.
There you go. And the looping thing, like that's something that Spotify cut down on recently as well, where if you have a track, say I release a track and I go in and just my user account and I play that track and then I just play it on repeat over and over again, never ending, they will either not, eventually that might get flagged as fraud, but they might stop paying. I forget all the different nuances of it, but don't do that either. You're looking for real fans, listen to your music. You can listen to your own tracks if but don't do it in such a way where you're like, I'm just going to put this on repeat and leave the room for 10 hours. It's like, you're just asking for trouble. It may not happen, but you're asking for trouble. And the trade-off for that trouble was probably 10 cents. So, so don't do that.
Just real quick. Hey, Daryl Scotty, how's it going? Malia has a great question that I think we might touch upon in a later section. Basically, if all this stuff is illegal, why don't the promo companies get shut down?
Well, and this is some of the gray area, because there's a big case where somebody used bots and an AI music service and generated $10 million worth of streams. And the way they did it, we'll get into some of that later, because this is where other artists are being impacted. But it's, I guess, technically not illegal. It's against the user terms of service with those platforms. But that's where reading through all the descriptions of that particular case, it was interesting because they were trying to figure out what he's actually being charged with, because the law doesn't specifically say that this activity is illegal. It was like wire fraud and money laundering, and so yeah, it's interesting. It's not cut and dry. And again, these platforms sort of ran into this problem flat-footed, and it's exploding. Somebody, a friend of mine, had a meeting with a company that helps services protect against fraud, and they mentioned, all the parties will remain nameless, that one of their clients, 50% of the streams on their platform were fraudulent.
And to reiterate, you're talking about a streaming platform.
A streaming platform.
A major streaming platform.
It wasn't Spotify, it wasn't Apple, it wasn't the big ones, but just so you're not thinking Spotify's 50%. No, right. It was another one. But and so anyway, it's a real problem for these platforms, and they don't know how to combat it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so streaming fraud exists for several reasons. People do it for several reasons. And without making any particular accusations, I'll just sort of vaguely say indie artists are guilty, medium middle class artists can be guilty, and I will just posit that maybe the major labels can be guilty as well. And why is that? So number one, there's a pressure to compete. Now, for a smaller time artist, that might mean I don't think I'm going to have an easy time getting gigs unless I have hundreds of thousands of streams on Spotify. So there's sort of reputational resume building reasons to inflate your numbers there. For a major label, it may be more about just market share dominance. We need to continue projecting this image of power and dominance. So this is one way to keep those numbers up. Basically boosting your credibility. Another thing is there was a assumption, maybe it was true for a while, I think now it's mostly a false assumption, that activity itself boosts algorithmic recommendation. So you thought, if I have 1 million streams, Spotify is going to recommend my track to lots more people, and suddenly fake engagement will turn into real engagement. That, if that was ever true, it's not true now.
Yeah.
What these platforms really value is quality engagement. So yes, you had 1 million people stream. If no one saved it, if no one added it to a playlist, if no one followed the artist's account, they know it's all fake, and they don't want to send those tracks to anyone else because it's going to be a bad user experience. And then the last thing is just sort of the simple fraud thing of financial incentives. If you have millions of streams, well, that amounts to real dollars as long as it slips through undetected. So you want to make money, you can try this fraud stuff. I don't recommend it.
Yeah. We've had a bunch more people join us. So just want to shout out that you're watching the Music Career Study Group. We're talking streaming fraud. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And hey, if you're here, don't forget to hit the like button. We'd appreciate it. And subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Miles has a good comment. This is exactly what we're talking about right here. It's like an IT guy at work offered to automate all of the PCs in the company to open my YouTube channel and start playing on startup. I passed because it felt shady and I didn't want my coworkers to hate me.
Which they would. After the third week, no matter how brilliant you are, they don't want the same damn artist or video appearing every day.
But also it points to the fact that this isn't hard to do. It's not like you need it's above my pay grade. I know how to use the internet and a few other programs, music programs. I don't know how to program stuff. But yeah, this if you've probably seen pictures of like these bot farms, they tend to be located in Southeast Asia, but I'm sure there's some everywhere. But you'll see just a wall of cell phones all plugged in, and they're all streaming music or doing some activity, because this is a problem not just for the music industry, but anything related to where metrics like the vanity metrics we mentioned can help drive the appearance of popularity. Robert's joining in from San Francisco. Hey, Robert.
What's up, Robert? Hey, one thing I wanted to say about Miles' example here that he was talking about is that this IT person was probably very well-meaning. They think, you're an independent artist. I like you. This is something I can do to help you. What they don't maybe know is what I said in the last section, where this can actually hurt you. Because if everyone in your company is auto-playing your YouTube channel videos without real engagement, they're not liking it, they're not commenting, they're not adding it to their playlist, what you're really doing is super counterproductive, because suddenly what YouTube is learning is, for everyone who watches this, no one likes it. And if that's the result, why would they ever share it in that sort of sidebar or in a recommendation, when things autoplay after the video you watch? Like, you're going to do really crappy in that because of this person's, misguided attempt to help you.
Yeah, that's why, when YouTube's a good example and streaming platforms are a good example, that when all these platforms were newer, views were a main metric. But then YouTube really led the charge quickly to like, well, views are kind of important. What we want is watch time. Like, if people just watch 10 seconds and bail, this video sucks. So please stay to the end of this video. But
nicely done.
But they started putting more emphasis on things like watch time. In fact, I just interviewed an artist with a big YouTube channel for a conference I was at down in LA. And he was saying that what he's noticing is that the algorithm is actually um, giving some preference again to smaller channels that don't have much views but have good engagement. And so I was like, that's an exciting trend, and that's probably them trying to help fight the need or fight the idea of people wanting to commit fraud or buy streams, because hey, if 10 people watched, they watched all the way to the end and they all liked it, that's probably good content. It deserves an audience. Let's open up the algorithm for that video, where something that has 1 million streams, one like, and people only watch 20 minutes or 20 seconds of a 5-minute video, that's probably a bad sign. So that's some of the things, adjustments that have been made on these platforms to help counteract that. We've got William from Spain.
Hello to Spain.
I'm not sure how to pronounce that city. I love Spain. I've not been there. I've been to
Malaga?
Chris and I have been to Valencia together multiple times. Barcelona. I didn't go to Barcelona with you, but I've been to Barcelona a few times, and great country.
Yes,
food
indeed.
There's amazing.
It was very sad to see all those pictures and videos from Valencia, by the way.
Yes, it was. They had big flooding recently.
I was going to get into some of the negative consequences for this behavior, or even if you're the unwitting victim of some of this sort of things, you may suffer these consequences too.
Yeah, because you might be sitting there thinking, great, thanks, guys. I've never done any of this, never will. Peace out. But we haven't even gotten to the biggest part of the issue yet that is really running rampant. And so, Chris.
Well, I don't know if this is, I think you might.
We'll get there, but
you'll get there. Yeah. So for one, this affects literally every music maker. And here's why. If the way that streaming revenue is generally paid is that all the money gets pulled together, let's just use Spotify as an example, all the revenue Spotify, then they've got their pool of money. Yes, payouts differ by territory and country and stuff, but in general, we've got this lump sum. Now we're going to divide it up based on market share, according to the percentages of all the streaming activity to the rights holders. If that's true, and if it's also true that a massive amount of streams are fraudulent, then this is affecting what you get paid by any streaming platform just because it's happening, because those people are taking money out of a pool that would otherwise get divvied up between less people or less tracks or less labels, however you want to talk about it. But it's kind of screwing you out of money that you should be earning.
Yeah, I can't highlight that point enough, because the average artist still does not understand how streaming payouts work. They are not a per stream rate. When you see a per stream rate, that really what it is an average per stream rate based on, we have X amount of subscribers this month, we had X amount of music usage, we mesh all that together and we come up with an effective stream rate for those tracks based on a whole bunch of different things. Because what you get paid for someone who's on a free account compared to a family plan, compared to something bundled into their cell phone, compared to someone who just has a premium account with the service, it's all different. And it's somewhat maddening. Yeah. So when you have a large portion of these being fake, they're just taking money out of the pool, which, like Chris said, makes you earn less money.
Yeah. So that, making money is clearly important to career-minded musicians, but almost like emotionally, a more damaging consequence in my mind is simply the availability of your music is at risk. So if you engage in fraud, if you pay someone who engages in fraud, or if you're sort of the unwitting victim of someone who's doing unscrupulous things to boost your numbers, you're going to get your music either, your account could be, flagged and kind of put in probation, or you just get your music wiped out entirely and removed from the places where everyone is going to listen to music. And that would suck if you woke up and suddenly your music couldn't be on Spotify, given how many people use that platform.
Correct. And this was what I think the let me see, looking down our notes. If we go, okay. This is one of those things where early on, when playlisting was exploding and artists were all jumping in on the playlist game, all these services popped up offering to pitch your music to playlists. A few of them are legit. Many of them are not. And I remember in the early days when this started to become a problem, a very well-known person in the indie artist community who had their music with our distribution company did something that got their music removed. They were trying as a test for their community all these different streaming pitching services. And one of them was fraudulent, and their music was flagged and it got removed, and there was no way for them to get it back up. It was a major headache, something they did not expect would happen. And one of the main things that's a tip off, it's a fraudulent type of company. The company may appear legit, and they may be legit by standards of, hey, you're getting what you paid for. But when they promise a certain stream count, that's sign right there. This is not real. This is fake. This is not legit. Because the legit playlisting or pitching services, what they will promise is to pitch your music to curators. They will not promise that you will get placed. They will not promise a certain amount of streams. If they are promising that, they are either lying to you or just committing fraud.
Yeah, so Big Yard Nation's got a story that I think is worth addressing. I get playlisters every week that want to add it on their list for a fee. We invite them to feel free to use the track if they feel it would help them. We use meta ads and amazing Barcelona tapas. Okay, so talking to our friend in Spain, but I might actually advise you not to write them back and suggest they even use your track. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's like, hell no, I'm not paying a fee for you to put my track on your playlist, but hey, go use it for free. It's kind of like a nice get the hell out of here. I might not even, I might suggest you stop doing that, because if one of these was to put your song on a playlist that is unscrupulous because of everyone else it's paying for a certain amount of streams, you could be collateral damage here, if that makes sense. I don't want to make people paranoid about what playlists their songs get on. It's like, to some degree, this is out of our control, but it almost seems like you're inviting it with the wrong type of playlisters.
Yeah. So this, this kind of leads into where the issue has become so big, where so many artists are collateral damage. And if you weren't here at the beginning of the live stream, I mentioned seeing an ad for a different music distribution company, and all the comments on their ad were like, you removed my music from Spotify without telling me or giving me any reason why. I haven't done anything wrong. What did I do wrong? That comment was over and over again. So what's happened where this has become a massive issue that's exploding in the industry, is like, it has to deal with it head on, is that because, artists were buying fake streams, or fraudsters trying to just distribute tracks and drive fake streams towards them to make money off those tracks. What happened is that becomes very obvious. If you have some random artist that seems to be a no-name artist, by no name, I mean they're not somebody in the mainstream music world that has a recognizable name, but suddenly they have 50 million streams, and they don't seem to have a social presence. They don't seem to have a following. They don't seem to have anything, but that becomes very obvious that it's fraud. So what they started doing in order to sort of spread out the fraud and make it look more legit is they started building playlists. And this could be what Big Yard Nation there is experiencing. They started building out playlists where a percentage of it is legit music. And then they started making, especially that court case I mentioned, that's the person earned $10 million from streaming fraud. They started generating hundreds, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tracks, and filling these playlists with legit artists and their fake tracks, and then buying streams toward fake streams, targeting those playlists, because having 100,000 tracks that earn 20,000 streams each doesn't put you on the radar, but it still does the same thing as far as how much money it generates. But the problem is all those indie artists, because a lot of times it'd be indie artists that are in the mix of those playlists, are none the wiser. and didn't do anything wrong, didn't ask to be added in that playlist. And suddenly all this fraudulent traffic is hitting their tracks and their music gets removed. That's where it has become such a massive problem that all these indie artists are becoming collateral damage, because you can't stop somebody from putting your music in a playlist. You can't even know it's, I mean, if you log into your Spotify for artists, you might see it there. But you don't know that they're not legit. They could look legit. And you might even be excited. Hey, some random playlist that looks legit added me to the playlist. I'm getting streams. That's what I've been trying to do. This is awesome. And then finally you get a notice saying your track or all your music is being removed. And it's become very common.
Nor should the artists, in my opinion, have the responsibility of knowing what's real and what's not. They're excited about the playlist placement. They got a billion things going on. Miles, here's my favorite DM starts with, "Hey, your music is fire," from username artiststreamfam.1 blah 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 blah. Yes.
So an example of what just happened to my bandmate's daughter. She's a very talented artist as well. They released the brand new artist, a duo. They released a couple tracks, and my daughter was listening to it and she really likes it. And she's like, "Hey, one of their songs has almost 10,000 streams." I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting. I wonder what happened," because I know them very well and I know what they're doing. And they weren't doing much to promote it because they were getting ready to go to college and all that. Anyway, I look at it. It looks like a legit playlist that they got added to. Because my first thought was, oh, they must have gotten added to a playlist. I go to that playlist. It looks super legit. It even says, "Hey, we're doing this, and if you want to be added to our playlist, just email us here. We take submissions from artists." And they had like 7,000 streams from that playlist. And then about 2 weeks later, their song disappeared. No warning from anybody, their distributor, no warning from Spotify. It was just gone. And it turns out that playlist was doing exactly what I just said, taking independent artists and putting their music alongside fake tracks and sending fake traffic to the whole playlist. And it takes a long time for them to figure that out.
Here's a question. Was the playlist still there?
I don't know, because I didn't bookmark it, and there's tracks not in it anymore, so I wouldn't see. And this leads to another thing that Spotify just announced. It was like last week or the week before, a new form where you can go and report bad playlists that seem to be doing these things.
So you can deputize yourself to go and search all of Spotify for all the sketchy playlists and do a citizen's arrest when Spotify has all the data they need.
Yeah, and this is what's frustrating for independent artists, because the platform, they know this activity's happening. And it's ballooned out of control faster than they probably ever expected. The average artist has no knowledge or ability to know who's adding songs to playlists, because even if you log into your Spotify for Artist account, it doesn't always show every playlist that's added your music. And it's not our job to go police playlists on a music platform. So this is where it's very frustrating as artists. Distributors aren't communicating well. Spotify just does it. They don't want the legal headache, and distributors are now being fined up to 150,000. Was it 150,000 or was it? There were some major fines. It might've been 10,000 per track. And I forget, it could get big quickly. And so distributors they don't even want to mess with it. I just got distracted by this comment right here from the Guns N' Roses shirt.
Wait a minute, are you being trolled?
that has to be a troll.
I think you're being trolled right now. Barney, is this the deputy? Deputy Barney is coming to the music biz. Preying on the hopes and dreams of musicians is an age-old terrible thing to do. I was going to say, we mentioned the risk of getting your song removed from the platforms altogether. We mentioned the risk of sometimes it might just be removed from algorithmic recommendation engine. So your music stays up, but you're not going to get a chance on Discover Weekly or Release Radar. There's also loss of royalties. Obviously, they don't want to pay you for the fraudulent streams, but that may mean your accounting is held up in some other way, even for legitimate activity. There could be legal action. Again, it's like sometimes I think a lot of this is still getting sorted out in that weird area between ethics and law, but there could be legal consequences. And then I think it's worth saying, like, you could take a hit reputationally if it comes out that your music gets removed because of some fraudulent, a suspicion of fraud. Whether you're guilty or not, people are going to think, oh, that guy actually doesn't have a fan base. That woman's streams aren't real, whatever. And that could follow you for a long time. So there's reputational damage, there's missed opportunity while you're engaged in all of this unscrupulous behavior. You could have been doing real things to drive real growth. And then I also mentioned bad data. You're feeding terrible user information to these platforms, basically saying, look at all these people who listen to my music and then hate it because they're not taking actions. So those are a lot of the consequences.
Yeah, the bad data is actually one of the things that probably has me overthinking everything these days, because I'm sure you've all experienced it. I see this on YouTube a lot. It's like, I have some core interests. Music is obviously one of them. But then I have a lot of other interests that I have that you probably wouldn't guess. But then so I'll click on a random video. And for example, Chris, this really happened. I like orcas, killer whales, orcas, their real name. And they're really cool animals. And I saw a video and I clicked on one. I'm like, I watched it all the way to the end. I was like, that was fascinating. Suddenly my whole feed is everything orcas. And I'm like, guys, all right, I liked the animal. I'm not living my life for and scouring the web. I clicked on one thing. That's all I did. So that's partly with music. I start thinking, well, I want to make sure that I'm getting in front of the right audience, because if the right audience gets in front of it and they like it, things can explode. Like, that's where these platforms work on your behalf. But bad data can ensure that it never recommends it. And we've both been sort of revitalizing some social networks, and you see what the effect of bad data is. It's really hard to overcome. So that's one of the big things when you even just try these. You might not get caught, your music might not get pulled, but it's feeding bad data, which could be just as bad.
Having nothing to do with the topic, for me, it's Facebook Reels, nonstop shark videos, just shark after shark after shark.
I also like roller coasters a great deal, and when I watch a roller coaster video, it's like I'm like, all right, I liked watching that video, but I don't need 1,000 of them.
Mm-hmm. Larry is asking a question that you sort of hit upon. How would they pick us up on fraud if we did not ever contract with anyone or contact?
So here's the deal. Here's what they do. And this is where indie artists are collateral damage. If your track has more than, they say it's 90% of fraudulent streams, they're pulling it. They're basically
89% though is totally fine.
Yes, 89%. But they're basically, so in the example of my bandmate's daughter's release, that song had probably a couple hundred streams from friends and fans. They were just starting out. They're just starting out still. But that playlist pulled it into their playlist and drove a bunch of fake streams towards it. And unbeknownst to them, it exceeded that threshold of 90%. Which meant all the streams on that playlist were fraud. They didn't have anything to do with it. They didn't pitch it, because I followed up with them. I was like, I got to get to the bottom of this. They're like, we didn't pitch that. We didn't even know it, because they didn't really log into their Spotify for Artist account. Their dad did, my bandmate, and he was the one checking in on it and all that stuff. So nobody did anything to perpetrate fraud, but they got basically the ramifications and sort of like being accused for it, even though they had nothing to do with it.
And there's some really good YouTube videos by artists who are also sort of YouTube content creators who have suffered the consequences of something similar, and they outline what they think the culprit is and all that stuff. Siberiak saying you shouldn't make DSPs your main delivery platform, treat it as a discovery platform. I agree in that you should own your audience, sure.
Malia asks, it sounds like there's nothing we can do if someone adds us to fake playlists. We can't control what others do. And I agree that this is where I think everyone is still trying to figure out where at the end of the day, who should be responsible for clean this mess up. I mean, we know who it should be. It's the platforms where it's happening. That Spotify, I think Spotify was that form that they just announced. If you log into your Spotify for Artist account, it's probably there, they have blog articles. It's probably one of the top ones because they just announced it. If you see your track added to a playlist that you think is suspicious, that's where I would go to that form and drop it in. They're not saying that they're immediately going to suspend that playlist, but I think it's their way of trying to, okay, we'll look into it. I think it's, if I'm going to give them some benefit of the doubt, I think it's like, hey, there's a whole community that could have eyes on this. Let's try and help each other out, share data. But there's a lot of things, data on their end that they know that they should be able to squash a lot of it.
Well, we do have some tips later on how to at least reduce the risk that you get caught in any of this stuff, even if you're an unwitting victim. But I think it might be interesting to just address why this problem is so difficult to solve. Difficult in quotes, or actually maybe it is very difficult to solve. I'm not a technologist, but one of the reasons is the streaming platforms do say, hey, we have just massive volumes of data, and the ability for us to accurately comb through it and ascribe motives to that data is difficult for us. And at the same time, the quicker we, whack the moles down in our game of fraudster whack-a-mole, the quicker the fraudsters get at moving around and finding new ways of, sneaking. And so they can circumvent the detection systems. That's one argument that they make. The other is, my take is that for them to be honest and fully transparent and say, hey, look, X amount of our overall streaming volume is all fake, would be very bad for their stock valuation or for their reputation or for whatever, you name it. It's just a bad look. And who wants to be the first to do the right thing and then suffer from it? Because they'll economically suffer, and then they'll be like, oh crap, now we have to go out of business. We were a good company serving lots of artists and we had a place in the world. Now we don't because we were honest. So that, again, I don't want to make too detailed an accusation there, but like I can believe that would motivate people to not fully address this.
Well, and also you mentioned something that there's artists at all levels juicing the numbers by trying to do some of these things. Going back to the market share, another tension in the industry is the major labels insisting that their content is more valuable than everybody else's and that they should get paid more. And as they've seen the independent artist market share grow, that last number I saw was in the 40% range. That frustrates them because, again, we're pooling money and saying we're splitting it up by market share. They're losing market share. So I don't know anybody specifically that's done this, but it wouldn't surprise me if major labels are buying fake streams for their artists because it'd be easy to hide because they're not going to cross that 90% threshold, but it would also just maintain market share for their catalog.
Yeah, and if you have 500 million legitimate streams, what's another 250 that are fake? Because it's all just a bit, not that that's a drop in the bucket, but you could be convinced they're real because the legitimate engagement is already so huge.
Yeah. So the whole system is solving this problem is going to be a really challenging issue because the whole system is set up where it's ready to fuel this kind of activity because it rewards people that have more market share. So increasing market share means that people are just going to do things to inflate that number, both real and artificially.
Yeah.
So that's why I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see some big changes in maybe the shine on streaming is long gone. I know when playlisting was brand new, it signaled a new way of people interacting and engaging with music that was awesome. It drove a lot of usage of music, but then it also brings along all this baggage. Where was a comment here? Where DSP shouldn't be your main delivery platform, treat as a discovery platform. I think we could go back to some sort of world where people buying direct from the artist. It's not solely or by itself, but I think, I don't know. I have 2 teenage daughters, and they're actually very interested in physical media. Like that's a very novelty thing for them. Like, oh, I can hold it. I can look at it, and I could see that we find some happy medium in the future where it's not just all or nothing on streaming.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I've been enthusiastic about this possibility for years that artists are going to realize the true monetization possibilities for their music are in e-commerce, in selling goods and experiences to their fans, and that stuff happens on your own website, not on these major platforms whose primary goal is to keep people on the platform. So, if you sell a lot of merch that pays the bills, that's going to be happening through your efforts on your site. It's probably not going to happen on Spotify, even though you can put merch on Spotify.
And Rick had a comment saying split the profits among the artists. There was a couple platforms. What did they call it? It
was called artist centric. Was artist centric and user centric.
Yeah.
And actually wasn't now I've put it out of my mind. I think user centric was the more artist friendly.
Yeah, I know SoundCloud experimented with it, and I believe that they abandoned that. And there was a couple other of the smaller platforms that were testing certain things. And the idea behind that was that my $10 a month for the streaming platform would go to the people, would be split amongst the people that I actually listen to. The hard thing is also with streaming is that you actually benefit when people pay but listen less.
Mm-hmm.
Because take that $10 example I just threw out there. If I have a fan of my band and all they listen to is my band for an entire month, I get $10. Or if they just listen to one track, that's all they did. They listened to one track, they didn't listen to music that month, I still get $10. If they go listen, if they're like a music fanatic and they listen to thousands of tracks in a month, all those artists made less money. Mm-hmm. So it's really weird how all these different models can play out and encourage bad or weird user behavior.
Yeah, because emotionally, I like that solution. I'm like, hey, if you only listen to 4 artists, split your $10 into $250 for each of them that month. I like that. I can imagine it creating some very misaligned incentives and some weird user behavior in a sort of fraudulent way.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else we got, Chris? Have we dived into how to avoid it?
No, we haven't. So this is maybe the most important part. First, focus on actual organic growth. Do not pursue these fraudulent methods. Build real relationships with real fans. Create great content that brings in real fans. When you advertise, advertising can be a way to target the right kind of listener instead of any sort of blanket thing that attracts bot streams and things like that. When you're submitting to playlists, you want to do a lot of research and make sure that they're, as best as you can tell, legit lists with very focused, either thematic or genre-based usage. If it's a playlist that has a bunch of random tracks from all over and you can't tell what the theme is, it's probably a red flag.
Yeah.
There's other thing, if you're ever asked to pay money, avoid that. What else?
Well, one of those things regarding those things you said, if you see other artists, look for reviews, like ask other artists if they've used the service if they have, what they thought of it. Was it legit? There's a couple out there that I know are legit, but again, they focus on pitching your music to curators, and they don't promise anything, like as far as number of placements or number of streams. Yeah, so it's always good to like find out what other artists are saying about some of these platforms.
Yeah, and I think if you're using a platform that connects you to curators and tastemakers, it's still worth doing the research there as well. Let's say you're on one of these promo aggregator type things. And you're like, oh, that sounds like a cool playlist. Still go open that playlist up on Spotify or YouTube or wherever. Try to make your assessment. Is this a list I would pitch to directly? If so, cool. I'll use this service to pitch. But basically, what I'm saying is, don't outsource your suspicion or your vetting just because there's an intermediary company pitching on your behalf.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, I think, you've got here invest in quality content marketing, creating engaging content. And part of that is, I think the precursor to that is understanding who your audience is and who should like your music, who tends to like your music. The one thing that's amazing about platforms like advertising on Instagram and Facebook is if you do a good job of setting up the ad right and knowing that you're targeting the right people, that's when like they can build an audience and exponentially expand who they target, because they have all the data on the back end about, oh, well, artists that like this music also like these things. And yeah, there's a big connection here, the whole social graph. So it's just a matter of like, you got to do that honest assessment of yourself. When artists, back in the early days, when Chris and I were at CD Baby and we had the digital store, the funny thing is, artists could curate their own little storefront on our store, and we sold their downloads and CDs. If you searched in our database, probably about 9 out of 10 artists at that time said they sounded like U2 or Coldplay. And they didn't sound like U2 or Coldplay. They were just trying to get on the coattails of a trend or something else. And it's like, that's the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. You need to be narrowing it down and be more specific and doing that self-assessment about who should like your music. And if something seems to be popping that's out of the ordinary, maybe that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Speaking of self-assessment, Miles has an interesting comment here. Maybe it's a bad way to look at it because, of course, I want a zillion streams, but I feel like building my in real life gigging network is way more satisfying and profitable. So I don't think there's any problem with that. In fact, if your main goal is to simply make a living or to make more money playing music, you're doing it the right way. You're going to make, if you have a, good network of gigs, it's probably going to pay you more than you'll make through Spotify or any streaming platform, until you get some massive volume of streams. I don't think that's a bad way to look at it at all. The point where the self-assessment might come in is if you're doing like lots of cover song gigs and what you really want to be as an original artist, maybe you do shift some of your time and attention to driving streams for your original music on Spotify because that's more fulfilling as opposed to cover songs. But I can't remember if you do both. I think you do originals and covers. But anyways, I think you're wise to stick with this path if the primary goal is to make more money.
Here's a question. Well, there's Mark has a good question I'll get to once we wrap up the fraud topic. We're almost to the end. But we'll get to it in a second. Anything else, Chris? Anything else? I would love for you all, well, Chris is thinking about that. I'd love for all of you all to, like, as we do these live streams, if you spot playlists that you think are problematic, bring it to the Music Career Study Group. Let's see examples. Let's share with the community. Let's help understand this, because I'm hearing more and more and more artists. If you search like on X, or I don't know if you could search directly on Facebook, this type of search, but like, my music was removed. Why? Like, if you search that kind of thing, you'll see so many artists talking about it. I was actually shocked when I saw that ad today. But by a distribution company, and how many artists were saying that. I knew it was impacting artists and starting to impact just collateral damage for the regular independent artists just trying to do their thing. But how prevalent it has become is really damaging for the whole community. So the more we have our eye on it, the more we make people aware and educate artists, the better, because it impacts everybody at some level.
Yeah. I think my concluding statement on the fraud issue is, you remember in the 90s and early 2000s, there was all this talk about nations denuclearizing, or whatever the term would be, getting rid of your nuclear armament in a safe way. And it's a weird thing to commit to, because you think, well, why would we have less missiles willingly and then trust our enemy to do the same thing? It's a very strange strategic position to be in, to have all sides de-escalating with some amount of trust. If the industry could get on the same page about this and kind of all do it together, holding hands, then pulling the band-aid off would be easier, I think, if everyone kind of suffers the impact of the truth all at once. And along with that wish is that, to the degree the platforms know exactly what's going on, or have a pretty good a good idea of what's going on, I wish they would immediately either penalize or put into probation the user accounts and the playlisters doing this instead of the artists. Because again, it's like, what tipped you off to this? What made you suspicious of this? The user behavior. So penalize the users, not the artists. That's my wish.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll get there. I know that it's typically the industry has been oriented around protecting the copyright and not paying out for fraudulent copyrights. But I think they're still getting their bearings about fraudulent usage. A legit copyright that's having fraudulent usage, that's something that's a new thing for the industry. All right. I hope that was informative and helpful and helps you spot some things. You should log into your Spotify for Artist account. Check out what playlist you're in. Click through to them. Check them out. It seems to be happening on, I don't hear much about it happening on Apple Music, but I'm sure it is. And so it's rampant on all the platforms, but it's just Spotify's the most popular one. And I think the playlist ecosystem, which Apple Music does not have, has helped create this next wave where they feel like, oh, if we just create these playlists with legit artists and fake stuff, it's harder to spot.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you for hanging with us with that. It's an important issue, but there's a couple questions here we can get to. Or at least the one, where was Mark's question? I thought it was a good one. It was related to AI, because it's somewhat related to...
Was it the one about teaching generative AI?
Yeah, the whole thing just reset. And now I'm trying. Yes. So Mark has a question, but since we're on the topic of fraud, what is RN doing to prevent our music from being used to teach generative AI? Well, we are absolutely not contributing to your tracks to any sort of service that is learning AI and such. This is a big issue for the industry as well, because these platforms, and this is going to be another big storyline for 2025, I'm sure. These platforms have said all along that they're not using copyright material, but then one of them finally came clean.
They just said, yes, we are.
Yes, we are. We are. And I think in these cases, it's the mainstream artists that are more at risk. But if your music's out there publicly available, there's really nothing anyone can do to stop someone from feeding it into some system. That's sort of the issue. Our sister company, BandLab, has a whole AI team. And so you may be wondering, well, what does BandLab do differently? We actually we have these composers that actually compose songs for us to teach AI. So we have a song starter tool that you push a button and it gives you a beat, a melody, a chord progression, and it's actually an amazing tool. It's supposed to help you start, not finish. It's supposed to kind of get rid of the blank page. And we have real musicians creating the chord structures and all the stuff that feeds into the system to train it. We're not training it on anything other than that. So for us, that's how we look at AI as something to help the community, not something that's there to replace the community. And we're absolutely not giving your music to people to scrape and learn from. So
yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in that court case that's between the major labels and the two AI music companies, where the labels just want to exert, kind of as part of copyright, the idea that you can approve or deny someone using it to train a model. So it's going to be fascinating to see how all that plays out.
Yeah, and it's funny, we started 2024, AI was all the headlines. And it feels like the last 3 or 4 years, there's been something that started the year that was all the headlines. It was NFTs one year. Nobody even knows what an NFT is or cares anymore.
I do.
I know. I knew I was going to get that reaction from you. That's why I said it. But the AI, I think the promise of it was, and a lot of the marketing you've seen around companies like, ooh, Hollywood's over, we just created this film. It's like, no, they just did that 1 30-second thing that looks amazing, and that's all it can do. It's not as advanced as they're making. It's advanced, and some of those like music platforms can do some cool stuff, but it's not, to me, it's not as in a scary place as what I think a lot of people thought. And at the
Oh, sorry. This is interesting because I think what Malia said, but composers could easily play any song and likely have a lot of repertoire on their brains. So are you making the argument that the AI companies are as well, which is just, hey, our machines are just learning, same as you do? Is that what you're saying?
I think she's saying because at BandLab we hire composers, but I think
oh, I see, who have repertoire in their brain. Yeah.
But I know Malia is a music theory professor. That, music theory is like rules that govern music. They are true whether you know about them or not. And so certain things about music are just true. So because there's a million pop songs that go 1-4-5 doesn't mean that when you played a 1-4-5 chord, you ripped them off. But it's like putting things together that sound pleasing and work. So
there are no rules, Kevin.
Anyway, this is a good question. How would you all describe the ultimate purpose of Reverb Nation? Reverb Nation is a music distribution and marketing platform, and it's kind of going over going through a revival. The company that Chris and I work for purchased it a couple years ago, and we are bringing it new life, lots of new features, updating a lot of things, and you'll see lots of good stuff happening. That's why we just launched unlimited music distribution for premium subscribers. There's some other features that we'll be announcing soon that are exciting.
I mean, I think I was just going to say, like, in a nutshell, I think it's to get your music heard and appreciated by a growing number of people. So distro helps with that, distribution, unlimited promotion opportunities, things like that. Tools you need to engage with your existing audience and monetize your music.
The opportunities feed inside is great. They're all real. And if you're a member, they're free to apply to. And we've seen artists get featured on big publications, get featured on the radio, get gigs, all sorts of things. And they're all part of membership. But one of the things I like about it's interesting since, the platform's been around for a long time and some new people are diving in and sort of looking under the hood and seeing what we can do with it. Going back to one of the comments earlier about, DSPs are just for promotion. It's like, what I like about the bones that we're playing with here at Reverb Nation is that it's set up for the artist hub to be where all the activity happens, or where ultimately all the activity leads back to. And I think that's how artists need to be thinking. It's not send all my fans to Spotify and hope I have a career and can monetize them somehow. It's like, that's just one piece of the puzzle. You need to be thinking about, how do I create a hub where all the activity flows back to? I can own that fan relationship. I can monetize that fan relationship, and I can build the business that I want. If you just want massive stream numbers and be famous on Spotify, then that's a different strategy. But if you're wanting to like make a living, build a business, build something that you have direct connection with your fans, I like where a platform like Reverb Nation is positioned for us to make some interesting changes to and have fun with.
Yeah, and Howdy Hey Radio is saying liking these live streams we're doing. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you recognized our faces and came over to Reverb Nation. Miles, there are rules to atonal music. There are tone rows, right? Didn't Schoenberg or Webern or one of those guys come up with a thing of you can't repeat a note until you've hit every other note? There are rules. Come on.
Oh, Malia's still on. I don't want to start any sort of music theory fight. And anyway, we're at time, but you guys have been amazing today. Very interactive, lots of great questions. We are here well, Chris, I'm in Italy next week. You're going to be here by yourself next week?
Yeah, so I shouldn't promise this. I did line up a vague date for Mike Warner to come on here, who he knows a lot about DSP dashboards and playlisting. I could ask him about the modern state of playlists. I don't know if it'll be next week, but sometime soon.
Yeah, maybe we can get him on for next week. If you're not on our email list, just go create an account at Reverb Nation. There's a free tier. You can get access to some of the tools, dig around, but you also get our emails. And we've been announcing these live streams in there. They're typically every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. If you're other parts of the world, just type it into Google and they'll tell you what time to be online.
Required watching. That'd be nice.
Nice. Yeah.
We like compulsory viewers.
And Chris, I was going to say, I was asking about next week because the following week is Thanksgiving here in the United States. And you and I, it's on Thursday. You and I will not be doing that. So, yes, thanks, Raylyn. It's a big issue, and I'm glad everyone stuck around for it because it's one that Chris and I have been talking about for a while. I'm like, how do we break this down in a way that's helpful for the community and understand that it's not just their own activity that's causing the problem. It's other people causing problems for them. And so we just all need to be aware. So.
Yeah. Well, I will see everyone next week. And then I guess you and I will see everyone in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'll join you in Italy. It's like 8 hours ahead. Or 8 hours ahead from me.
You'll still be awake. Who are we kidding?
I'll still be awake. Yeah. Yeah. So
awesome.
Anyway, yes. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for commenting and engaging. There's lots of past music career study groups available on the Reverb Nation YouTube channel that you can go watch, where we dive into all sorts of topics. And Chris will be back next week.
See you soon.